Okay, we are going to be factoring. We've learned how to factor a couple of different ways. We've done GCF, where we see what goes into everything. We've done what we call the easy way, where you can look at it and split it into two binomials. One of the things that had to happen to do the easy way was there had to be no number here. So we see we cannot do that way on this one, so we'll try our GCF by seeing if there's anything that goes into all of them. And I see that I could take a 5 out of that, which would leave me with x squared plus 3x plus 2. So now I kind of look at what's left and I say I could use the easy way on this one. So I could have my 5 and split up into my two binomials. My x times x would make x squared. I'm looking for the last terms that multiply together to get 2, but they also have to add together to get the 3. So I can think of positive 2 and a positive 1 would work. So now I have factored that polynomial. So we're going to keep going. We're going to look at this one. No, we're not going to look at that one. We're going to look at these two. How about that? Where I look and I see there's a number in front of there, so I cannot do it the easy way. So I'm going to check, is there a number that I could factor out of all of those? And I see that there is no number that goes into 4, 13, and 3, which means I'm going to have to learn another way to factor. So this one's a little bit harder because I need to have two numbers that multiply together to get 4 in the beginning, numbers that multiply together to get 3 in the end, and I have to make 13 in there somewhere. And the trouble with this, I kind of have to go back to FOIL. I have to multiply those first terms. It's going to be two binomials. I have to multiply the first terms, and I have to multiply the last terms right here, but then the outer and the inner. So all of those four things have to work together. It makes it kind of tricky. So I'm going to show you a little bit of a trick. First of all, I know that there's an x squared, so the first terms have to have an x in them. And I know that the first term has to either be a 4 and a 1. I'm going to put a little f here. Or it could be a 2 times a 2. We've got two options there. My last term is where I go next. Could be a 3 and a 1. So I need to try to find things that work together. So I want them to add to 13, so I could look 4 times 3 is 12. 1 times 1 is 1. So that kind of takes care of my outer and my inner, and then they have to add together. They get 13, so I know that this is the combination that works. So my first terms are going to be a 4 and a 1. So 4x and 1x. And my last terms are going to be a 3 and a 1. However, that 4 has to go with the 3 on the outer. So the 4 has to be able to multiply times the 3. So this needs to be my plus 3. In these inner terms, that's what the inner terms are going to be my 1s. So I would have a plus 1. So my first terms, 4x times 1x is 4x squared. My outer terms are 4x times 3, so I get my 12x. That's where I had my 4 times 3. Then I have my inner terms is 1x times 1x. That's where my 1 and my 1 were at. And my 1 times 3 is 3. So that's where these two came from. So I was looking for something that worked together first, last, and outer, and my inner. So 4x squared plus 13x plus 3. So those two match, which tells me that these are the correct factors because they do multiply back out to equal that standard form. Now, if this hadn't worked this way, I could have also tried 4 times 1 and 1 times 3. I could have come down here and tried 2 times 3 and 2 times 1. Just happened to be that first option worked. Okay, so let's look at B. I see that I cannot factor any number out of all of them, so I'm going to have to do it this way. We could call it the harder way. I know it's a trinomial, so it's going to be 2 binomials. My first term has to multiply together to get 3, so that only leaves us 3 and 1. My last term has to be multiplied together to get 2, so that's only 2 and 1. So we don't have a lot of options here. I do know my first terms are going to have x's on them. And I see that it's going to have to add together to get a -7. So both of these are going to have to be minus signs. A negative times a negative will equal a positive, and my negative plus a negative will equal a negative. So I need to find out which combination would work. My first terms are going to be a 3 and a 1. Those are my only options there. And I need to see which ones go together. So 3 times 2 would equal 6. 1 times 1 would equal 1. And 6 plus 1 does equal 7. So that will work. My 3 needs to be with my 2. So that's going to, my outer terms have to go together. So my 3 and my 2. And my inner would be my 1 times 1. So these two have to go together. Some teacher told me one time that you have to make it smile with an eyebrow. I thought that was a rather ridiculous eyebrow. However, I've always remembered it, so you could try that too. So make it smile with an extremely large unibrow.